The storm outside battered the stained glass windows of the headmaster's office, casting flickering shadows across the room. A fire blazed in the hearth, crackling with unnatural fervor. Fawkes, Dumbledore's phoenix, sat perched in his usual spot, but tonight he watched his master with tense eyes. Albus Dumbledore stood before the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back, his gaze distant. For decades, he had fought for the light. He had guided generations of students, stood against dark forces, and shouldered burdens no one else dared carry. But something had shifted. The war had taken its toll. The ministry's corruption had grown intolerable. And Harry was just a boy, yet they pinned everything on him. The order, the prophecies, the expectations, they all revolved around a child who never had a choice. Dumbledore had given his life to protect people. But where had that led? Betrayal. Death. Innocence lost. Perhaps, he murmured to the flames, the only way to save this world is to control it. Behind him, Severus Snape emerged from the shadows, silent as ever. His expression was unreadable, though his dark eyes flickered with suspicion. "You summoned me, headmaster?" Dumbledore turned slowly. "Yes, Severus. I have a task for you. But first, I must ask you a question, one that will determine everything going forward." Snape inclined his head. "Ask it. Where does your true loyalty lie?" A pause. The question cut deeper than it seemed. Snape's eyes narrowed. "To Lily. Always." Dumbledore's smile was sad. "I thought as much." He waved a hand, dismissing him. "You may go." Snape lingered. "Albus, something's changed in you." Dumbledore's gaze turned steely. "Perhaps I've finally accepted the truth. The world will not be saved by noble hearts and good intentions. It needs order, discipline, power." As Snape disappeared into the corridor, Fawkes let out a soft cry. Dumbledore turned to the Phoenix, eyes now burning with an eerie resolve. "Even you must understand, old friend. They call me a hero, a leader, a saint. But saints do not win wars. I must become what the world fears, so I can shape it into something better." The shift began quietly. Dumbledore's public image remained intact. He still attended ministry meetings, still gave comforting speeches at the Hogwarts feasts. But his eyes watched more closely. His decisions grew sharper, colder. He appointed new staff members, witches and wizards with mysterious pasts. He began stockpiling magical artifacts, many of them dangerous. And his influence within the Wizengamot expanded with alarming speed. Harry noticed first. Returning for his 6th year, he found Dumbledore distant and unreachable. Their private lessons on Horcruxes had been replaced by cryptic riddles and obscure assignments. The headmaster seemed to be testing him, pushing him toward power rather than protection. One evening in the room of requirement, Harry confided in Hermione and Ron. "I don't know what's going on," Harry said, pacing. "He doesn't talk to me like he used to. It's like he's changed. He's colder." Hermione frowned, tugging at the hem of her sleeve. "Maybe he's under pressure. He has the weight of the world on his shoulders." "No," Harry replied, shaking his head. "It's more than that. He's different. He talks about controlling fate, about using the war as a chance to rebuild everything. It's like he's planning something big, and I'm just a piece on the board." Ron shifted uncomfortably. "You don't think he's gone mad, do you?" "I don't know what I think," Harry admitted. "But I do know we need to keep our eyes open." Meanwhile, Dumbledore had begun assembling a new circle of followers. Former unspeakables, renegade cursebreakers, and scholars expelled for their dangerous ideas. They met in the depths of Hogwarts, in chambers even the Marauder's map didn't show. They called themselves the Eclipse. They believed in absolute magical governance, a world free from Muggle corruption, bloodline disputes, and weak-willed compromises. And Dumbledore, once the beacon of resistance, now stood at their helm. The shift was subtle at first. Laws passed by the ministry began reflecting his influence. Strict curfews for young witches and wizards, increased surveillance of magical households, and a sudden interest in ancestral magic. Most citizens welcomed the changes, grateful for the sense of security. But the Order of the Phoenix was not so easily fooled. At Grimmauld Place, the usual members gathered in tense silence. Kingsley Shacklebolt, Tonks, Moody, and Lupin all turned to McGonagall, who had just returned from Hogwarts. "It's worse than we feared," she whispered. "He's using the school as a front." There are restricted areas even I can't access anymore. He's changed the wards. I no longer hold the highest authority there. Lupin rubbed his temples. What are you saying, Minerva? She looked up, her voice trembling. Albus Dumbledore is no longer our ally. He is becoming something else, something dangerous. Outside the Order's knowledge, Dumbledore stood beneath the Forbidden Forest, deep within the ancient ruins of a pre-Hogwarts civilization, long abandoned, but brimming with raw, primordial magic. His followers gathered around him in a silent circle. Tonight, they would awaken the Veil of Ascendancy, an ancient magical construct that, if restored, could amplify a wizard's abilities tenfold. It required a wielder of immense strength, willpower, and vision. Dumbledore placed his palm on the stone altar and began to chant in a language older than the founders themselves. Tenebris Cor Meum, Lusum Mundo Negavit. The runes glowed red. The ground shook, and from the shadows something ancient stirred. Back at Hogwarts, Fawkes let out a mournful cry and vanished in a burst of fire. Dumbledore did not look back. The Veil of Ascendancy trembled with awakening magic, humming with dark energy that echoed through the forgotten ruins beneath the Forbidden Forest. Dumbledore stood firm, his silver beard fluttering in the magical wind, eyes closed as the runes beneath his feet pulsed with a crimson glow. Around him, the members of the Eclipse knelt, heads bowed, not in fear but reverence. When the ritual ceased, the stillness that followed was deafening. The ancient structure had not crumbled. Instead, it had fused with Dumbledore's core, tethering its power to his soul. A faint shimmer surrounded him, nearly invisible, but there for those who looked closely enough. He opened his eyes slowly. It is done. His voice carried more weight now, as though spoken through both mortal and eternal layers. The ritual had not twisted him into something grotesque, nor had it shattered his body. Instead, it had enhanced everything he was, the mind, the magic, and the hunger for change. We are no longer bound by the limits of modern wizardry, he declared to his followers. The world will no longer swing between chaos and complacency. With this power, we bring balance by force if we must. The Eclipse members rose, their wands glinting in the torchlight. To the new order, they whispered in unison. At Grimmauld Place, the Order of the Phoenix had gathered again, and the mood was grim. Harry paced in front of the ancient tapestry of the Black family, fists clenched at his sides. So what now? He demanded. We can't just sit around hoping he changes his mind. Moody slammed his walking stick against the floor. He's too powerful to confront directly. We need to understand what he's doing, how he's drawing magic none of us can trace. I think I know, Lupin said quietly. He stood, retrieving an old leather-bound book from his satchel and laying it on the table. The Veil of Ascendancy. It's a myth, or it was. Hermione leaned forward, scanning the text. It was buried during the Founder's era. Supposedly it connects to a layer of raw magical essence, like channeling the ley lines beneath the earth itself. More than that, Lupin added. It doesn't just enhance magic. It twists the wielder's purpose, makes them believe their vision is the only truth. Harry felt a pit form in his stomach. You're saying it's not just power. It's manipulation. Yes, Lupin nodded. And it feeds on certainty. The more Dumbledore believes he's doing the right thing, the stronger it makes him. McGonagall was pale. Then we need to undermine that certainty. Show him the consequences of his new path. But how? Tonks asked. He's locked Hogwarts down tighter than Azkaban. He knows every move before we make it. Hermione looked up from the book. Then we need someone he won't expect. Someone who knows him, but isn't blinded by loyalty. Harry's face tightened. Snape. The name hung in the air like a curse. Meanwhile, Hogwarts had changed. The once warm corridors were now colder, quieter. Suits of armor marched in unison during patrols, and enchanted paintings whispered to one another in hushed tones. Students walked faster, laughed less, and eyed the teachers with suspicion. The air shimmered with spells of surveillance and discipline. The changes were subtle but ever-present. A new curriculum had been introduced, classes on magical responsibility, wizarding hierarchy, and foundational law and enforcement. Detention was no longer supervised by professors, but by members of Dumbledore's new internal order, robed figures with no names and no questions. Only a few dared to speak against it. Luna Lovegood, with her strange clarity, whispered to Ginny Weasley in the library, "The castle doesn't like this. You can feel it, can't you? The stones are nervous." Ginny nodded. "It's like it's alive, watching us, like it wants to help, but doesn't know how." "I think Hogwarts remembers," Luna murmured, eyes distant. "The founders built it to be free. Dumbledore's turning it into a cage." Deep in the dungeons, Severus Snape brewed a potion in silence. The dark stone walls seemed more oppressive than usual, and even the cauldrons bubbled more sluggishly. When the knock came at his door, he knew who it was before he answered. "Enter," he drawled. Harry stepped inside, looking older than his years. "We need to talk." Snape didn't turn around. "If this is about Dumbledore, you're already several steps behind." Harry moved closer, placing a small vial on the desk. Lupin found a ritual. A dark one. The Veil of Ascendancy. Snape paused, then looked at Harry, eyes unreadable. "So, he's crossed the threshold." "We need you," Harry said simply. "Not as a spy. As the only person who ever stood up to him without fear." A long silence stretched between them. Then Snape gave a slow, sardonic nod. "Very well. But if we are to succeed, we must not attack his power. We must shake his belief. And for that, we need the one person he trusts more than anyone." Harry frowned. "Who?" "His brother," Snape said. "Aberforth." In the heart of Hogsmeade, the Hog's Head had seen quieter days. But when the bell over the door rang and Snape entered, the room fell into a hush. Aberforth Dumbledore, wiping a glass behind the bar, looked up slowly. "What do you want?" he growled. Snape stepped forward, flanked by Harry and Hermione. "Your brother is not who he once was. He's building something terrible, and only you can get close enough to talk sense into him." Aberforth scoffed. "Albus never listened to me even when he was sane." "He still loves you," Hermione said gently. "You're the only piece of his past not tied to war or politics." Aberforth's face darkened. "He's not the brother I knew." "No," Harry said. "But you might be the only one who can bring him back." That night, under the rising crescent moon, a letter was sent to the headmaster's tower, delivered by a simple, non-magical owl. Dumbledore read the note in silence. No signature, just a few familiar words. "You said once that power was safest with those who didn't seek it. Have you forgotten?" For a moment, something in his expression faltered. A flicker of hesitation. Then he stood, and the windows of the tower darkened as his silhouette disappeared into the shadows. The chessboard had been set, and for the first time, Dumbledore wasn't sure which side he was on. Dumbledore stood before the pensive in his private chamber, the moonlight casting sharp angles across his weathered face. The parchment still rested on the edge of his desk, its words etched into his mind with burning clarity. He traced his fingers over the rim of the silvery basin, the swirling memories inside seemingly more turbulent than usual. "You said once that power was safest with those who didn't seek it. Have you forgotten?" He hadn't forgotten. That was the problem. In the deepest corner of his mind, where no occlumency could hide the truth, the younger Albus still lived, ambitious, arrogant, and guilty. The memory of Ariana's death was a blade that never dulled, and Aberforth had been its eternal whetstone. Now Aberforth was stirring again, pricking old wounds with carefully chosen words. Dumbledore exhaled through his nose, eyes narrowing. He had not come this far to be undone by ghosts. But he could not ignore the tremor in the castle walls, nor the way the very stones of Hogwarts shifted beneath his feet as though resisting his presence. The Veil of Ascendancy had awakened something. Yes, it had granted him vision, power, and the ability to finally mold the world into one of order. But there were prices, whispers, and shadows. He turned to the enchanted map hovering near his window, an evolution of the Marauder's map, crafted by his own hand, tracking not just movement but emotional resonance. There, in Hogsmeade, a flicker of familiar magic. "Aberforth." "So," Dumbledore murmured to the knight, "you've come out of hiding." The Hog's Head had never seen such silence. Aberforth sat at a table with Harry, Snape, and Hermione, arms folded tightly across his chest, gaze hard and unrelenting. "I'll tell you now," he said gruffly. "If you think I'm marching into Hogwarts for a heart-to-heart, you're cracked." "We're not asking for a reunion," Snape said. "We're asking for access. You know, places in the castle that even the Marauders never found." Aberforth looked at him sharply. "And why should I help you, Snivellis?" Snape didn't flinch. "Because I know what Dumbledore has become. And I know what he could become still. If he's allowed to keep feeding from the veil, he won't just change the world. He'll unmake it and rebuild it in his image. And you think I can stop him?" "No," Harry said. "But maybe you can remind him who he used to be." Aberforth grunted, rubbing his beard thoughtfully. "He won't listen." "He already did," Hermione whispered. She pulled a tiny enchanted device from her pocket. It glowed faintly. "We tracked the owl's delivery." He read the letter. And then, the magical wards around his tower shifted. Something broke his focus. Aberforth's eyes flickered. "I'll get you in," he said finally. "But you'd better be ready to face him. He's not the man who gave you lemon drops and taught you patronuses. He's something older now. And colder." Meanwhile, inside the halls of Hogwarts, the eclipse was evolving. Dumbledore had chosen a handful of elite witches and wizards, brilliant, obedient, and hungry. He trained them personally in the Tower of Insight, where ancient runes lined the walls and time itself ran differently. Among them was Cassian Rowell, a former Auror who had turned after losing his family to a Death Eater ambush. Now he was Dumbledore's shadow, loyal to the cause and willing to die for it. "There is a flaw in the world," Dumbledore told them one evening, his voice like low thunder. "It lies not in evil, but in permission. We allow too much. We forgive too easily. From now on, forgiveness is earned." They listened without question, taking notes, modifying spells, binding new oaths in blood and memory. Each of them had received a sliver of the veil's magic, a fraction of what Dumbledore now wielded. Outside their chamber, Hogwarts responded with resistance. The enchanted suits of armor slowed, staircases twisted away from Eclipse patrols, and the Room of Requirement refused to open for anyone wearing the sigil of the New Order. The castle was alive, and it was remembering who it truly belonged to. At dawn, the group entered the tunnel beneath the Whomping Willow, led by Aberforth. The passage was choked with roots and dust, but still usable. At its end was the hidden trapdoor that opened into the third-floor corridor, one that had been sealed since the Battle of Hogwarts. Aberforth muttered a complicated incantation, and the stone groaned open. "Once you're in, you're on your own," he warned. "I'll hold the door as long as I can. But if Albus senses me—" "He won't," Hermione assured him. "I've masked our magical signatures. For now." They slipped inside, navigating the forgotten halls that hadn't seen footsteps in years. It felt like sneaking through the bones of a slumbering giant. Then they reached the tower. The door to the headmaster's chamber no longer bore the phoenix-shaped knocker. In its place was a swirling mass of dark crystal, pulsing with warding spells. Harry stepped forward and raised his wand. "On 3. "No," Snape said, pushing him aside. He drew a silver-bladed dagger from his robes and sliced a shallow cut across his palm. Blood dripped onto the stone. The door groaned open. Inside, Dumbledore was waiting. Not in anger, but in curiosity. "I wondered when you'd come," he said, standing before the vast windows overlooking the lake. "A former Death Eater, a war hero, and a girl who knows far too much. And of course my brother's hand." Harry raised his wand. "We're here to stop you." Dumbledore turned slowly, eyes glowing faintly with runic light. "Stop me from what, Harry? From ensuring that children no longer die for old men's wars? From unifying a world torn apart by greed and blood?" "You're not unifying anything," Snape said coldly. "You're replacing tyranny with your own. Is that what you think?" Dumbledore smiled sadly. "That I seek control? No. I seek permanence. I seek peace so complete that it cannot be undone. Not by politicians, nor dark lords, nor rebels." Hermione stepped forward, her voice soft. "And how many minds must you bend to make that happen? How many choices must you steal?" Dumbledore looked at her for a long moment. Sometimes choice is the enemy of peace. A silence fell over them, thick as fog. Then Harry spoke. "You taught me better than that." Dumbledore's expression faltered. For a second he looked tired. Older. Human. But then the crystal at the center of the chamber darkened. The veil's magic surged. And the moment was gone. "I had hoped it wouldn't come to this," Dumbledore said, raising his wand. "But if you insist on standing in my way, then I will show you what true order looks like." Magic exploded from the tower in a shockwave, rattling every stone in the castle. The war for Hogwarts had begun. The shockwave threw them back, as if an invisible hand had slapped the air from the tower. Harry crashed into the wall, stars flaring across his vision. Hermione screamed something, but her voice was drowned out by the thunderous hum of magic vibrating through the chamber. Dumbledore stood untouched, arms raised, his wand glowing with a terrifying brilliance. The very air around him shimmered like heat above fire. Behind him, the great windows of the tower cracked but did not break, the magic sealing them from any escape. "You should not have come," Dumbledore said, and his voice wasn't entirely his. It was deeper now, laced with something ancient, something that echoed from the veil. Snape rose to his feet, blood trailing from a cut on his forehead. "He's drawn too much from it. That thing's in him now." Hermione's hand shot to her bag. "We need to cut his connection to the veil. If we can." Dumbledore flicked his wrist. The bag burst into flames, vanishing in a blink of light. Hermione staggered back, clutching her burned fingers. "No shortcuts," Dumbledore said. "No clever tricks this time." Harry stepped forward, his wand trembling in his hand. "You always told me love was stronger than fear. That truth mattered. That people deserve the right to fight for what they believe in." "They do," Dumbledore said, eyes narrowing. "But they do not deserve the right to destroy each other in the process." He thrust his wand forward. A torrent of silver-blue energy ripped across the room. Snape shouted and conjured a barrier just in time, but the spell shattered it like glass. All three were flung back again. "We can't win like this," Hermione gasped. "No," Snape said, picking himself up with grim determination. "We need to force him into a memory trap. Something personal. Something he won't be able to ignore." Harry's eyes widened. "Ariana." Snape nodded. But it was Hermione who moved first. With her left hand, she pulled from her robes a small glass orb, the remembrall Neville had once lost. But this one had been enchanted by her over the past year, infused with the threads of time and memory. She hurled it at the floor, and it burst with a blinding white light. The room changed instantly. Gone were the cracked windows and the storm of runes. In their place, a sun-drenched field, with 3 children playing beneath a tall tree. A girl with wild dark hair laughed, her eyes gleaming, spinning in circles. 2 boys, one blonde and tall, the other smaller and sharper in manner, watched her, arguing over a book. Dumbledore froze. "No," he whispered. "Not this." The illusion was flawless. The younger version of himself, Gellert by his side, watched Ariana run across the field. Her laugh rang like bells. "You remember, don't you?" Hermione whispered. "The moment before it all went wrong." "It was a lie," Dumbledore murmured. "All of it. I lied to myself. I told myself I could protect her and still chase glory. I thought I was special." "You were her brother," Snape said quietly. "That should have been enough." The scene shifted. The duel began, not between Gellert and Albus, but between all 3. Aberforth shouting, Gellert laughing cruelly, Dumbledore torn between them. The flash of light. The scream. And Ariana's lifeless body. The real Dumbledore fell to his knees, clutching his chest. For a second, the glow around him faltered. His wand dimmed. Harry stepped forward, wand lowered. "Come back, Professor. You haven't gone too far." "Not yet." But then the voice returned. Not Dumbledore's voice, something colder. "Hollow. He is mine." The field illusion shattered like glass. The room was back, the tower thrumming with magic. But Dumbledore's face was no longer entirely his own. His eyes were black now, pupils like voids. He rose slowly, as if reanimated, strands of dark energy wrapping around his arms. "He's possessed," Hermione breathed. "The veil isn't just magic, it's a will." "I am not possessed," Dumbledore said, though his voice now echoed with 2 tones. "I am awakened. The veil shows the truth. Chaos must be trimmed. Emotion must be silenced. I see now peace is not born. It is forged." Harry's grip on his wand tightened. "You're not forging peace. You're burying the world." With a cry, he cast Expelliarmus, but the spell was caught midair by the runes swirling around Dumbledore's body. "You cannot win," Dumbledore said calmly. "You are children playing in the dirt. I will not kill you. Not yet. I will show you what I see." He raised both hands. In a surge of magic, the walls of the tower became transparent, revealing all of Hogwarts, only it was changing. Corridors were rebuilding themselves into geometric perfection. Stained glass depictions of school history warped into sterile sigils. Statues of witches and wizards turned blank, featureless, uniform. "This is the future," Dumbledore said. "No bias. No pride. No ambition. Just harmony." A scream echoed from below. They turned to see a patrol of Eclipse guards dragging a struggling figure through the entrance courtyard. Neville Longbottom. Harry's heart twisted. "He's arresting students now?" "Resistors," Dumbledore said simply. "The ones who reject order must be re-educated." Hermione's eyes burned with fury. "You mean brainwashed? Does it matter if it prevents the next Voldemort?" Snape's voice rang with finality. "Yes, because without the freedom to choose, we become him." Dumbledore looked at Snape for a long moment. "You of all people still clinging to that morality?" "I made my choices," Snape said, stepping closer. "And I lived with the consequences. Can you say the same, Albus?" The glow in Dumbledore's eyes flickered again. For a brief instant, the power dimmed. The veil's grip loosened. Hermione seized the moment. "Now!" Together, they raised their wands and cast a binding spell, Premium Vincula. One they had developed with Aberforth's guidance, a fusion of truth, guilt, and memory. It struck Dumbledore dead center. He screamed, not in pain, but in defiance. The chamber pulsed violently. Lightning arced from the walls. Then everything went white. When the light faded, Dumbledore was gone. In his place, a faint shimmer hovered where he had stood, an echo, like a heat mirage. The tower had collapsed inward on itself, imploding into silence. The veil's energy had vanished. "Where is he?" Harry gasped. Hermione's voice shook. "I think the spell pulled him into his own mind. Into the veil's plane." Snape stood staring into the void, expression unreadable. "Then we don't have much time." Harry turned to him. "What do you mean?" "He's still alive. And if we're going to save him, and the world, we have to follow him into the veil." The remnants of the tower crackled with energy, a vortex of rippling air and time swirling where Dumbledore had vanished. Hermione steadied herself, breathing heavily, the binding spell still tingling through her fingers. Harry stepped closer to the distortion. "He's still in there. I can feel it." Snape nodded once. "The veil's realm isn't death." "Not exactly. It's a mirror of thought, of memory, shaped by will. Dumbledore's mind is powerful. In that place, he could become unstoppable." Hermione swallowed hard. "We have no idea what lies on the other side." "No," Harry said. "But we do know what happens if we stay here. Dumbledore's army, the Eclipse, they'll keep spreading. Even without him." "The veil's influence didn't just corrupt him," Snape said grimly. "It amplified what was already there, his guilt, his need for control. In that world, we may see him twisted beyond recognition." Hermione took Harry's hand. "Then let's go. Together." Snape raised his wand, muttered a sequence in a language older than Latin, and the vortex stabilized. The distorted space took shape into a doorway of pulsing gray light. "One warning," he said. "Time flows differently in the veil. We might be gone seconds here, or years. If we get lost." "We won't," Harry said. "We've come too far to stop now." With a breath, he stepped forward and vanished into the light. Hermione followed instantly. Snape hesitated a moment longer, staring at the swirling doorway. Then, with a last look toward the ruined sky above Hogwarts, he disappeared after them. They emerged into a world of silence. The Veil realm was not dark, it was empty. Shades of gray and white stretched in every direction, the ground below them soft and reflective like liquid glass. Shapes floated on the edges of vision, memories, echoes, thoughts made physical. The trio stood together on a kind of glowing path, suspended in the nothingness. Harry whispered, "Where do we even begin?" Before anyone could answer, the landscape changed. Suddenly, they stood in the Hogwarts Great Hall, but not as they knew it. It was colder, harsher. Banners of black and silver lined the walls, with the eye of Eclipse emblazoned across each one. The students sat in perfect rows, uniformed identically, faces blank. Professors marched like guards. And at the head table sat Dumbledore, his older self, but regal and distant, dressed in silver robes, eyes empty of warmth. "Is this real?" Hermione breathed. "No," Snape muttered. "It's his mind. His vision of order." Dumbledore rose from the head table and spoke, his voice magnified and devoid of emotion. Emotion leads to chaos. Chaos to war. War to suffering. But I have found a better way. In unity there is peace. In peace there is silence. In silence there is harmony. The students repeated in unison. In silence there is harmony. This is his utopia, Snape said. Sterile. Controlled. Dead inside. Harry stepped forward. This isn't peace. This is fear in disguise. The illusion Dumbledore turned his gaze toward them. For a moment his eyes flickered, not black, not silver, but human. Conflicted. You are intruding, he said softly. Leave before you are swallowed. We're not leaving, Hermione said firmly. You used to tell me to question everything. To think for myself. You used to believe in choice, Harry added. What happened to that man? Dumbledore's image began to distort, as though something behind it was struggling to break through. Then the vision shattered. The scene transformed again. This time, they were in Godric's Hollow. Snow fell softly around a small cottage. A younger Dumbledore stood inside, looking down at a letter in his hand. On the table was a clipping, Gellert Grindelwald arrested in Nurmengard. This memory was quieter. No grand speeches. No illusions of grandeur. Harry, Hermione, and Snape watched as the younger Dumbledore collapsed into a chair, covering his face. I told myself it was for the greater good, he whispered. And behind them, the real Dumbledore appeared. Not twisted. Not possessed. Just tired. I see now that I never truly believed it, he said. I wanted to. I needed to. Because admitting the truth meant admitting I had been wrong about everything. You were afraid, Hermione said gently, of what would happen if you let go. Dumbledore looked at her, then at Harry. I saw you, both of you, become more than I ever dared to be. You forgave. You trusted. I thought I could save the world by removing its flaws. But I forgot that flaws are what make us human. The veil around them flickered. The world cracked. Suddenly, they were standing on a bridge between two realities. On one side, the peaceful emptiness of the veil. On the other, chaos. Hogwarts burning. Eclipse soldiers marching. Fear ruling. You have a choice, Snape said quietly. Dumbledore stared at the horizon. If I go back, the darkness comes with me. Then don't fight it alone, Harry said. Let us help you carry it. For a long moment, Dumbledore said nothing. Then he reached out and took Harry's hand. The veil screamed. The world convulsed. And the bridge collapsed. They were falling. Colors. Light. A rush of voices. Screams. Laughter. Music. Then silence. When Harry opened his eyes, he was back. They were in the Hogwarts courtyard. Snow was falling. The tower ruins were gone, replaced by scorched stone and lingering sparks of magic. Students were gathering, murmuring in confusion. The Eclipse soldiers? Disoriented. Dropping their weapons. Hermione helped Snape to his feet. We made it. A soft groan came from behind them. Dumbledore lay unconscious, but breathing, his face peaceful for the first time in days. Harry looked to the sky. The storm had passed. But the real battle, he knew, was just beginning. The silence that followed their return was louder than the storm that had raged before. Dumbledore lay at the center of the courtyard, curled as though asleep, his long silver hair splayed across the cracked stones. Snowflakes melted on his skin, and for a moment he looked no different than the wise, gentle headmaster Harry had once known. But beneath the surface, they all knew the truth. He had crossed into something far darker and returned changed. Around them, Eclipse soldiers staggered. Without the tether to their master's will, the enchantments controlling them were unraveling. Their eyes regained clarity. Some fell to their knees in confusion, others backed away, horrified by the blood on their hands. Professor McGonagall rushed out with several staff and students trailing behind. Her eyes widened at the sight before her. A destroyed courtyard, unconscious Dumbledore and Harry, Hermione, and Snape standing amidst the wreckage like ghostly victors of a war no one understood. What in Merlin's name happened? She whispered. Snape stepped forward, his voice ragged. He's free for now. Free? McGonagall's gaze shifted to Dumbledore. What did you do? We went into the veil, Harry said quietly. We pulled him back. McGonagall looked as though the words couldn't register. No one has ever returned from beyond the veil, she said, her voice trembling. That's impossible. Hermione, her hair matted and eyes weary, said, so was a headmaster starting a secret army and nearly toppling the wizarding world. McGonagall gestured for Madame Pomfrey, who immediately began examining Dumbledore, muttering healing spells under her breath. But even as she worked, the older witch looked deeply unsettled. His body is intact, she said, but there's residue. Veil magic clinging to him. His soul is fractured. Snape frowned. He'll awaken, but he won't be the same. Meanwhile, the ministry arrived in swarms. Dozens of Aurors flooded the grounds by Broom and Portkey. At their head was Kingsley Shacklebolt, now acting minister for magic, face lined with grief and determination. He took one look at the courtyard and immediately signaled for a perimeter to be drawn. We've received reports of eclipse attacks across Europe stopping mid-assault, he said. Their power broke the moment Dumbledore fell unconscious. And the damage? Harry asked. Kingsley's eyes darkened. Grave. Dozens dead. Entire towns taken over with enchanted wards. Azkaban was breached. Several high-risk prisoners escaped in the confusion. We're still recovering. As the cleanup began, Harry sat quietly on a bench at the edge of the courtyard. Everything felt distant. The cold didn't bite. The noise of shuffling feet, crying students, and the bark of Auror orders were all background to the storm inside his mind. Hermione joined him, brushing snow from her cloak. He'll wake up soon. Do you think he'll remember? He'll remember enough, Harry replied. What he became. What he almost did. He didn't come back by himself, she said. You reached him. Harry shook his head. No. He came back because a part of him wanted to. If that piece hadn't survived, we would have been lost. Across the courtyard, Snape stood with Kingsley, their conversation heated but private. Snape's eyes flickered toward Harry often, his face unreadable. Eventually, he approached them, cloak billowing softly. They want to take him, he said bluntly, to a secure ministry facility. Kingsley's not wrong. Dumbledore is still a magical threat. And too many in the Wisengamot are calling for punishment, not healing. Hermione's mouth tightened. They'll try him like a criminal? They'll study him like a creature, Snape replied. He crossed a boundary no one ever has. That frightens them more than anything he did. Harry stood. Then we don't let them take him. You don't have that authority, Snape snapped. I'm not asking for it, Harry said. If there's any part of the real Albus Dumbledore left, he deserves more than a cold cell and wand point interrogations. Snape's mouth opened to retort, but paused. He studied Harry for a long moment, then gave a single, almost reluctant nod. There may be another way. That night, under tight ministry guard, Dumbledore stirred. The infirmary was silent except for the slow beeping of monitoring charms and the hum of magical wards layered thick across every window and door. Harry, Hermione, Snape, and Kingsley were the only ones allowed near. His eyes fluttered open. Pale blue. Clouded but present. Harry, he whispered. Harry stepped forward. You're back. Dumbledore winced. Am I myself? You're not who you were, Snape said flatly. But perhaps you're who you should have been. Dumbledore blinked slowly, as if his mind were sorting through hundreds of voices. I remember the eye, he said softly. I remember, believing I could fix it all. You can still help, Harry said. We need you, but not as a leader, as a witness, as a guide. Kingsley stepped closer. The world doesn't know what to do with you, Albus. Your name, your image, it inspired a generation. And now it terrifies them. Dumbledore looked up, his face suddenly filled with terrible clarity. Then give them the truth, he said. Let them see what I became. Let them hear the madness, the pain, the hubris. Let them know I am not above guilt. That I am not a god. Hermione whispered, You'd testify? I must, he replied. Only then can something better rise from these ashes. Snape narrowed his eyes. Do you understand what that means? The shame? The hatred? Dumbledore looked to him, no longer the proud figure of old, but a man humbled by his own fall. I welcome it, he said, because redemption must be earned, not gifted. Outside, the snowfall ceased. And for the first time in months, the night at Hogwarts felt still. But even as peace settled, Harry knew, beneath the calm, the cracks of the world were still healing. And in those cracks, shadows lingered. Waiting. The Wisengamot chamber had never felt so tense. A bitter wind slipped through the cracks in the ancient walls of the Ministry of Magic's lower levels, whispering like the ghosts of past trials. Every seat in the grand circular room was filled. Ministry officials, international observers, heads of magical communities, and a few remaining Hogwarts professors. Even portraits of long-deceased chief warlocks seemed to lean in closer from their frames. At the center, seated in an enchanted chair bound by golden chains, was Albus Dumbledore. His hands were folded neatly in his lap. His once sparkling eyes were duller now, etched with a sorrow deeper than time. The grandeur of his robes was replaced by a plain, midnight blue cloak. Symbolic humility for a man whose reputation had shaken the foundations of the wizarding world. Harry stood to the side with Hermione, Ron, and Snape. McGonagall sat behind them, tense but silent. The charges being read aloud felt like thorns in their ears. Conspiracy to undermine the Ministry of Magic. Unauthorized use of the Department of Mysteries. Creation and deployment of an illegal magical militia known as Eclipse. Use of veil magic, classified as Level 1 forbidden arts. Each word struck like a blow, but Dumbledore remained composed. When the final accusation echoed off the walls, intent to alter the fundamental balance between life and death, the room fell utterly silent. The chief warlock, a sharp-eyed woman named Cassia Rourke, leaned forward from the elevated bench. "Albus Dumbledore," she said. "How do you plead?" Dumbledore raised his eyes to meet hers. "Guilty." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Kingsley, standing near the prosecution bench, blinked. He hadn't expected such stark honesty. "I accept full responsibility for my actions," Dumbledore continued. "But I also offer full transparency. I will not run. I will not hide behind legacy or accolades. Ask me anything. The world deserves to know." The silence that followed was filled with unease. The trial had been expected to last weeks. Now, it teetered on the edge of something very different. "Very well," said Rourke. "We will forego the usual procedures. Interrogators may proceed." Hermione stepped forward first. "Headmaster," she began, her voice carefully even, "when did you begin experimenting with the veil?" "After the first war with Voldemort," he said. "I sought a safeguard, something to protect the wizarding world if evil returned in forms we could not yet imagine. The veil, it offered answers. At first. Did you ever intend to use it to bring someone back?" she asked quietly. Dumbledore's gaze flickered. Pain rippled across his face. "Yes," he said. "I wanted to bring back Ariana. My sister." A murmur spread through the chamber. Even Snape looked momentarily surprised. "I told myself it was academic," Dumbledore added. "A noble pursuit. But the truth is, I missed her. And my guilt, what happened to her, drove me to madness in disguise." Hermione nodded, stepped back. Then Ron, uncharacteristically serious, took her place. "Did you ever think about stopping? About asking for help?" Dumbledore smiled bitterly. "Many times. But by the time I realized how far I'd gone, I was already consumed. The eye of the veil promised control. What it took in return was reason." Snape stepped forward last. "Why choose Eclipse?" he asked. "Why build an army in secret, knowing what it would cost?" "I believed war was inevitable," Dumbledore said. "Not just with dark wizards, but with the nature of death itself. Eclipse was meant to be humanity's evolution, unbound by mortality, united in purpose." "And how did that go?" Snape asked coldly. Dumbledore's shoulders sagged. "It ended in chains and corpses." The chamber was quiet again. Cassia Rourke turned to Kingsley. "Do you still wish to push for sentencing, Minister?" Kingsley looked at Dumbledore. Then at Harry. Then out at the watching crowd. "No," he said. "I request that Albus Dumbledore be placed under magical surveillance, housed within a secure ward at Hogwarts under the watch of trusted guardians. Let him teach. Let him guide. And let the world see what atonement truly looks like." Gasps rippled again. But there were nods, too, some tentative, some firm. Rourke conferred with the Wizengamot, then struck her gavel. "So ordered. The defendant will remain in Hogwarts custody. This trial is adjourned." As the gavel fell, Harry exhaled. A decision had been made. Dumbledore was not a free man, but neither was he cast into darkness. Later that evening, back at Hogwarts, the castle felt different. Wards hummed with a new tone. Students whispered of the Dumbledore trial, and whether he'd truly changed. Some were afraid, others curious, but all eyes turned whenever he passed. He no longer occupied the headmaster's office. That role remained McGonagall's. Instead, he lived in a small, Spartan chamber in the astronomy tower. Under layers of protective enchantments, he spent his days cataloging his memories under the watch of Hermione and a team of magical ethicists. Not prisoners, observers. But one night, Harry visited alone. He found Dumbledore staring through the tall window at the stars. "Do you regret coming back?" Harry asked. Dumbledore didn't look at him. Every moment, and none of them. Harry moved beside him. "There's something out there. Beyond the veil. You saw it, didn't you?" "I did," Dumbledore said. "It's not evil. But it is hungry. Curious. It watches us, Harry. And now it knows one of us can reach it." Harry's breath caught. "You think it'll come back?" "I think," Dumbledore said softly, "that the veil is no longer a boundary. It's a door. And we've left it ajar." Below them, the lights of Hogwarts glowed against the snow. And somewhere beyond, in the void between life and death, something ancient stirred. Waiting. Hogwarts, though intact, was no longer untouched. In the weeks following Dumbledore's trial, the castle settled into a strange rhythm. Part tension, part anticipation. While Dumbledore remained under magical surveillance in the astronomy tower, students walked a little faster through the corridors, avoided long looks at darkened corners, and spoke of dreams they couldn't explain. Harry had them too, visions that weren't his, shadows that whispered through his mind at night. He kept his wand under his pillow and his thoughts locked behind Occlumency walls, but still, something pressed at the edges of his magic, probing, gentle, and persistent. Hermione noticed it first in the restricted section. "The veil isn't just a boundary between life and death anymore," she whispered one evening, poring over one of the books Dumbledore had reluctantly allowed her to access. "It's becoming permeable." "Like a membrane?" Ron asked, leaning over her shoulder with a sandwich in hand. "More like a thin wall soaked with magic on both sides. Every time someone dreams of it, studies it, or speaks its name, it weakens just a little more." "And who exactly is speaking to it?" Harry asked. Hermione hesitated. "Not who. What?" In the days that followed, strange events began to mount. A third-year Ravenclaw collapsed during a divination class, her mouth moving in silent whispers, eyes rolling back. When brought to the hospital wing, she muttered fragments of phrases in an ancient language Madame Pomfrey couldn't identify. Firenze, summoned from the Forbidden Forest, declared solemnly that the stars were shifting. Alignments he had never seen before were forming, like a puzzle long unsolved. Then came the night of the storm. Lightning cracked the sky like glass above the castle. Winds howled around the spires. But it wasn't the storm that woke Harry, it was the cry. High and shrill, echoing through the walls of Hogwarts like a child wailing from behind closed doors. Harry bolted from bed, wand drawn, and found Ron already awake beside him. "You heard it too?" Ron asked, pale. "I think everyone did." They weren't wrong. Lights flicked on in every tower. Students murmured from doorways. Professors raced through the halls, checking wards, casting detection spells. But nothing was found. Nothing, except a single line carved into the stone floor outside the Great Hall. "Let the gate be opened." When McGonagall confronted Dumbledore the next morning, she found him staring at a half-burnt tapestry in his room, fingers trembling. "I didn't do it," he said, voice hoarse. "But I felt it." Something reached out through the veil. "It's no longer just observing, it's calling." "To whom?" she asked. "To all of us," Dumbledore said. "But mostly to those who've touched death and come back." McGonagall's lips thinned. "You've brought something into this world we don't understand." "I know. What is it?" "A question," he said, dressed as a promise. Meanwhile, Harry sought answers his own way. He returned to the Department of Mysteries. With Kingsley's permission, and guarded by a team of 6 Aurors, Harry descended once more into the cold, spinning corridors. The Hall of Prophecies stood silent. The brain room buzzed faintly. But it was the veil chamber that called to him. It looked unchanged. The black arch still stood, draped in the same tattered curtain. Yet it pulsed now with faint light, an ethereal shimmer like heat rising off stone. Harry stepped closer, ignoring the Auror's warnings. And then he heard it. A voice. Harry. Sirius. His heart lurched. Harry, help me. He knew it wasn't real. He knew Sirius had died. But the voice, it had his cadence, his laugh, his pain. His memories. Hermione's research came back to him. The veil feeds on memory. Emotion. Longing. Let him go, Harry whispered. Come through, or bring me out, the voice pleaded. Then softer. You know the way. He reached out. A hand caught his wrist, Snape. You will not touch that thing, Snape hissed. Not again. Harry pulled back, trembling. It's learning, Snape said, his eyes locked on the veil. Adapting. Testing. Just like he said it would. When they returned to Hogwarts, the news was worse. More students were reporting voices. Dreams. Some had scribbled symbols in their sleep. Runes unknown to any magical record. Dumbledore grew increasingly disturbed, pacing at night, muttering about a threshold being crossed. The veil isn't just hungry anymore, he told Harry. It's aware. But aware of what? Harry asked. Dumbledore looked up at the sky, where the moon seemed slightly dimmer than before. Of us. That night, Hermione discovered something else, an unfinished ritual hidden in Dumbledore's old notes. A countermeasure. A way to possibly seal the veil again, to force it back into slumber. It requires 7 anchors, she explained. 7 magical souls bound by sacrifice. A mirror of the original opening. 7. Ron repeated. That's us, isn't it? Harry nodded grimly. But it's not just us anymore, Hermione added. The veil's touched too many minds. If we wait too long, sealing it may not be possible at all. And then an owl arrived at McGonagall's window. A message. Short. Urgent. A small magical village in northern Scotland. Every soul inside it vanished. No signs of struggle. No remains. Just a circle carved into the earth around the town. The message ended with 2 words. It's beginning. The news of the vanished village hit the wizarding world like a tidal wave. No traces. No survivors. No dark mark above the sky. Just absence. Entire families wiped from existence as though they had never been born. Magical and non-magical alike. Hogwarts, once a sanctuary, now felt like the last fort on the edge of a collapsing world. Harry stood in the headmistress's office with Ron, Hermione, McGonagall, and a pale-faced Kingsley Shacklebolt. Dumbledore was there too, though no longer bound by magical shackles. At some point, they had realized containment was futile. His knowledge, dangerous as it was, might be the only chance they had left. This is spreading, Kingsley said, voice tight. Another family in Cornwall last night. No alarm. No resistance. Just gone. We don't have time for debate anymore, Hermione said firmly. She laid out the parchment with the counter-ritual on the desk. The ancient runes shimmered faintly, reacting to her presence. We have to start preparing the anchor spell. Dumbledore stepped forward slowly. The ritual's essence is sacrifice. 7 individuals must offer up something precious. Part of their magic, their past, even their soul, willingly binding themselves to the world. It is not a gesture. It is a vow. And if one of the anchors breaks? Harry asked. The veil opens. Permanently, Hermione answered. A long silence followed. Then we'll do it, Harry said. Obviously, Ron muttered. We're not letting this thing take over. I'll do it too, Hermione added. We've already risked our lives. One more won't make a difference if it saves everyone else. Kingsley crossed his arms. You'll need more than 3. I'll summon Neville. Luna. Even Ginny. They've all felt the pull. They deserve a choice. But they didn't need to wait long. By nightfall, 7 had stepped forward. Harry, Ron, Hermione, Ginny, Neville, Luna, and surprisingly Draco Malfoy. The group met in the room of requirement, which had reshaped itself into a circular chamber lit by blue fire. 7 runic circles had formed around a larger glyph that pulsed with energy, like a heart trying to beat again after too long in slumber. Malfoy stood slightly apart from the others, arms folded, expression unreadable. Why are you here? Harry asked quietly, stepping next to him. I saw my mother in the mirror, Malfoy murmured. She told me the same thing your godfather did. Come through. Or bring me out. You don't believe it, do you? I believe in protecting what's left. Even if it means trusting people I hate. Harry gave a small, grim smile. Funny. I feel the same. The ritual would take days to prepare. Each of them had to craft their offering, something deeply magical, deeply personal. For Hermione, it was her memory of discovering magic for the first time, a burst of light in a lonely Muggle library. For Ron, it was his laughter, enchanted into a vial and sealed, the sound of unshakable joy even in the darkest of moments. Ginny gave up a Quidditch medallion tied to her childhood, soaked in protective charms from Molly. Neville offered a single drop of blood from the night he stood against Voldemort. Luna contributed a tear shed during her mother's funeral, stored in a crystal orb that sang when touched. Malfoy gave the ring his father once wore, a cursed thing, but bound to family magic that spanned centuries. And Harry? He gave a single hair from his mother's brush, the last physical connection he had to her, enchanted to glow with the echo of her love. As they prepared, the veil responded. The arch trembled in its chamber. The whispers became clearer, louder, more persistent. McGonagall stood guard over the students, rotating patrols through the castle. Professor Sprout reinforced the grounds with vines and living enchantments. Flitwick and Snape created magical beacons to monitor dark energy, little lights that dimmed with each passing hour. But not everyone believed the ritual was the solution. Within the Ministry, a faction began to rise, wizards and witches led by an ambitious bureaucrat named Silas Greaves. Containment is failure, Greaves declared at a gathering. Dumbledore brought this upon us. If this veil is a threat, we must harness it before it destroys us. To everyone's horror, Greaves had begun experimenting with veil magic in isolated laboratories. Rumors spoke of spells that could reach into the beyond, of enchanted items humming with voices that shouldn't exist. Dumbledore stormed into the meeting chambers the next day, robes swirling like shadow. "You are children playing with dragons," he said coldly. "I have felt what lies beyond that arch. It is not salvation. It is hunger." "You're no longer trusted, Dumbledore," Greaves sneered. "You started this. Stand aside." "I will not." In secret, Greaves sent agents to disrupt the ritual at Hogwarts. That night, a fire broke out near the Room of Requirement. The seventh circle was damaged. Ginny was nearly killed. They barely managed to save the glyph. The room, sensing its own importance, sealed itself behind wards even Hermione couldn't fully understand. But now they knew the truth. They weren't only fighting the veil. They were fighting each other. In the aftermath of the sabotage, Harry sat alone in the astronomy tower. The stars above twinkled softly, uncaring. Dumbledore joined him, gazing into the night. "They're afraid," Harry said. "And they should be." "Yes," Dumbledore said. "But not just of the veil. They fear what it shows them. What they might become." Harry turned. "What do you see when you look through it?" Dumbledore's expression didn't change, but his voice lowered. "I see myself, ruling a world where death obeys me. Where no sacrifice is ever wasted, because no one ever truly dies." Harry swallowed. "And do you want that world?" "I used to," Dumbledore said. "Now I want to stop it from becoming real." Below, the castle pulsed with quiet power. The ritual neared completion. But the veil was watching. And waiting. The Room of Requirement, now sealed tighter than Gringotts' deepest vault, thrummed with ancient power. The seven circles shimmered with the personal sacrifices made by Harry and the others. Each item pulsed like a heartbeat, glowing in resonance with the larger glyph etched into the floor's center. The room itself had become a living entity, reactive, protective, volatile. But something was wrong. Even after the seventh circle was restored following the sabotage, Luna's orb, the tear she had given, began to dim. Its glow, once steady and melodic, flickered like a dying star. At first they thought it a side effect of the attack. But Luna, sharp as ever, was the first to realize the truth. "The veil is draining us," she whispered one evening, kneeling beside the artifact. "Not just magic. It's taking pieces of who we are." Draco scoffed. "Didn't we already offer those pieces?" "No," Hermione said, suddenly pale. "We gave willingly. This is theft." Their preparation was perfect, but the veil had begun reacting to their defiance. It was adapting. Back in the castle, alarms began to flare. Firenze, the centaur, burst into the great hall during breakfast, eyes wide with celestial fear. "The stars scream with false patterns," he announced. "Time is folding. Realities are bleeding." I saw 1,000 Dumbledores walking 1,000 different paths. None of them lead to peace. McGonagall tried to keep the panic contained, but the castle was under pressure from all sides. Students' dreams were being invaded. Some woke up screaming, claiming they'd spoken to the dead. Others couldn't wake up at all. One girl from Ravenclaw floated 5 feet above her bed for hours, eyes glazed white, whispering riddles about the end of time. The fat friar vanished entirely. Peeves refused to come out of hiding. Even the paintings began to fall silent, retreating to their frames and covering their ears. As Harry and the others continued refining the anchor spell, Hermione noticed inconsistencies in the runes. Words she had etched with perfect precision were now reversed. Circles shifted centimeters out of place. Magic didn't behave as it should. "I think the veil is trying to rewrite the spell," she said, shaking. "It's like it's learning from us." "We need a counter-rhythm," Dumbledore said. "A force equally ancient, untainted by the veil's influence." "But we have nothing older than the veil," Neville said. Dumbledore looked at him sharply. "Not true. There's something older still, something the veil fears." Harry blinked. "What?" "Love," Dumbledore said softly. "Pure, unbound, sacrificial love." For a moment the room was still. "But that's not a magical artifact," Ron protested. "That's a feeling. And feelings leave traces," Dumbledore replied. "Lily's protection in your blood, Harry. The Weasley family's magic. The way Hermione tore time itself to save you too. These are all threads. If we can weave them into the ritual, we may counter the veil's corruption." The idea was dangerous. No text supported it. No rituals existed for channeling love itself into an ancient anchor spell. But they had no choice. Over the next day, Hermione restructured the glyph with runes from old protective enchantments used by families and bloodlines. Luna, ever otherworldly, added symbols found only in dreams. Neville contributed herbological symbols tied to the Earth's life force. Together, they rebuilt the spell with emotion as its core. But each step forward was met with retaliation. One night, while Harry meditated before the veil's whispering grew unbearable, he slipped into a trance-like vision. He stood on a battlefield, lifeless and quiet. Dozens of bodies, friends, foes, even Hagrid, lay still. Dumbledore stood in the center, eyes glowing red, his wand transfigured into a staff of bone. He raised the dead with a flick, puppets bound by magic, not soul. Harry screamed himself awake. He rushed to the veil chamber and found Dumbledore already there, eyes closed, breathing shallow. "You saw it too?" Harry asked, voice hoarse. "Yes," Dumbledore murmured. "That is the future if we fail. I saw you controlling the dead. And that is the future if I succeed the wrong way." Harry stepped back. "Do you even trust yourself anymore?" Dumbledore opened his eyes. "I trust you more." The ritual was nearly ready. But the veil was no longer just whispering. It was hunting. During a final rehearsal of the spell, the castle itself shook. The sky outside darkened unnaturally. Windows shattered. A scream rose from the dungeons, long and inhuman. When Harry, Ron, and Draco raced down to investigate, they found a student, Dennis Creevey, suspended in the air by invisible threads, eyes rolling, his body contorted in midair like a marionette. "I see them," Dennis moaned. "Everyone who ever died. They're coming back. They want through." Dumbledore arrived in time to cast a severing charm, freeing the boy from the veil's grip. But it cost him. Blood dripped from his ears, and his hand trembled for hours afterward. The ritual could not wait any longer. The room, the veil, the castle, everything was spiraling. Even the goblins had closed Gringotts without explanation, sensing the imbalance. On the eve of the ritual's activation, the 7 anchors stood in their circles, hands linked. Dumbledore stood in the center, acting as the fulcrum. The love-infused glyph lit up, golden and blue. "Once we begin," Dumbledore warned, "there is no stopping. No restarting. We either succeed, or the veil opens fully." Hermione looked to Harry. "Ready?" He nodded. The ritual began. Light burst from each circle. The room shook. Runes blazed to life. The sacrifices began to resonate, forming a protective dome of living magic around the participants. Dumbledore raised his wand and channeled the energy, focusing it into the heart of the glyph. But then it screamed. The veil itself opened, a crack at first, then a chasm. From it emerged shadows, not just ghosts, but figures twisted beyond recognition. Faces they knew. Cedric, Fred, Tonks, Remus, all beckoning, all speaking in perfect, familiar voices. Harry stared, trembling. "Mum," he whispered, and Lily Potter stepped through the veil, smiling, and wrong. The room was suffused with an eerie glow as the figure of Lily Potter stepped through the widening veil. Her smile was warm, but her eyes held an unsettling sharpness, a flicker of something darker beneath the surface. Harry's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, all the pain, all the loss seemed to vanish, replaced by the impossible, a reunion. "Harry," she said softly, reaching out. But her fingers brushed his cheek like cold metal. The others tensed. Ron gripped his wand tighter. Hermione's eyes narrowed, already analyzing the magic twisting around them. "It's not her," she whispered. Dumbledore moved forward, voice calm but laced with urgency. "This is no true spirit. The veil can mimic memories, emotions, even souls. But it cannot create love. Only a hollow shadow." The illusion of Lily's hand curled into a claw, and the warmth turned to ice. The chamber around them flickered and warped, the runes on the floor flickering like dying stars. The veil had breached the ritual's defenses. "Harry Potter," the false Lily intoned, voice layered with hundreds of whispers. "You think your love can stop what is inevitable? I am the hunger. I am the void. I am the answer to your desperate prayers." Suddenly, the shadows surged. Figures stepped forward through the chasm, twisted, broken versions of the dead. Bellatrix laughing cruelly, Snape's hollow eyes filled with rage, and Voldemort himself, more terrifying than memory, cloaked in veiled darkness. "We are not dead," Voldemort hissed. "We are the veil's children, born from despair and pain. You sought to bind us, but we will consume your world." Harry's wand lit with desperate magic. "Everyone, hold the line." The 7 anchors raised their hands, casting the combined ritual's power. Light met shadow in a thunderous clash that rocked Hogwarts itself. The veil screamed in fury, its power fracturing and reassembling like a living storm. But the false Lily stepped forward again, her smile widening, eyes burning with malevolence. "You cannot win, Harry. The past is never truly dead. It will drown your future." Harry stumbled backward as the veil's whispers clawed at his mind. Memories twisted into torment. He saw his parents die again and again, heard the cries of his friends lost to battles he never wanted. Dumbledore's voice cut through the chaos. "Focus on what is real. What is here, not what could have been." With a surge, Harry found his center. He called out to the others. "Remember who you are. We're the anchors. The veil cannot touch us if we stand together." Ron, Hermione, Ginny, Luna, Neville, and Draco formed a circle, their sacrifices glowing brighter. The combined force of their love and will pushed back the shadows inch by inch. But the battle had taken its toll. The veil's power was not just magical, it was psychological, an assault on their deepest fears and desires. Hermione's knees buckled as memories of her parents, never known, flooded her mind. Ron saw visions of abandonment. Draco was haunted by the ghosts of his family's mistakes. Dumbledore stepped forward, chanting words lost to time. His wand glowed with fierce intensity, and the false Lily hissed, shrinking back into the veil's depths. "The veil feeds on pain," he explained. "It cannot survive where love and hope are strong." But even as they pushed back, the veil's chasm remained, a wound in reality itself. "We've bought time," Dumbledore said, voice grave. "But the battle is far from over." Harry looked at his friends, their faces etched with exhaustion and determination. "We have to seal it," he said. "Once and for all." "But how?" Dumbledore's eyes darkened. "There is a price for such power. A price I once hoped never to pay." The room fell silent as the meaning of his words settled over them. The ritual was a beginning, but the end would demand more than sacrifice. It would demand a choice. The silence after Dumbledore's words was heavy, pressing down on them like a physical weight. The flickering light from the ritual's glyphs cast long shadows across the chamber walls, twisting and stretching as if mirroring the turmoil within each of them. Harry's gaze locked on Dumbledore. What choice? Dumbledore's eyes, once so bright and full of warmth, now held a somber depth. "To seal the veil permanently, I must offer myself as the anchor, the final sacrifice." My life, my magic, my essence. I would bind myself to the veil's fracture, holding it closed from within. Ron's jaw clenched. You can't be serious. There has to be another way. Hermione shook her head slowly, fear evident in her eyes. Dumbledore, we've already seen what the veil is capable of. If we don't act, it will consume everything. Draco stepped forward, unusually steady. And if you do this, what happens to you? I will become part of the veil, trapped between worlds, neither fully alive nor dead, Dumbledore answered. But it is the only way to ensure the safety of this world. Harry swallowed hard. The thought of losing Dumbledore, who had guided him through so much darkness, was unbearable. Yet, the alternative, allowing the veil to tear open and swallow everything, was far worse. Luna's voice, gentle but firm, cut through the tension. Sometimes the greatest power comes from surrendering, not fighting. The group exchanged heavy looks. There was no denying the truth in her words. Dumbledore turned to Harry, placing a hand on his shoulder. You've grown into a wizard far beyond your years. You must continue to protect what we fight for, even if I am gone. Harry nodded, eyes stinging with unshed tears. I'll make sure your sacrifice isn't in vain. Preparations began immediately. The ritual circle was expanded, runes glowing with newfound intensity. The 7 anchors positioned themselves around Dumbledore, who stood in the center, his face serene despite the burden ahead. One by one, the group offered their magic, weaving love and protection into the spell. The atmosphere thickened with raw energy, crackling like lightning ready to strike. As the final words were spoken, Dumbledore closed his eyes and raised his wand, channeling everything he had into the veil's breach. The chamber trembled violently. A piercing light burst forth, blinding and pure. The veil shrieked, pushing back against the intrusion, but Dumbledore's magic held firm. Slowly, the chasm began to close. But just before the final seal could be cast, the false Lily reappeared, more solid now, her presence a twisted mockery of hope. You think you can trap me forever? She taunted. I am eternal. Dumbledore's voice rang out, steady and commanding. You are but a shadow, a parasite feeding on grief. Your time ends now. With a surge of magic, he banished the illusion, forcing it back into the veil's depths. The final rune glowed, and the fracture sealed with a thunderous crack. The chamber fell silent. Dumbledore stood still, his face pale and exhausted. Slowly, his form began to shimmer, becoming translucent. Harry reached out. Professor, I am grateful, Dumbledore whispered, to have fought alongside you. And then he was gone. The room felt emptier than before. They had won, but at a terrible cost. Outside, the sky cleared. The stars realigned. The veil was no longer a threat. But in the hearts of those left behind, a new darkness stirred. The knowledge that sometimes, victory demands the greatest sacrifices. The emptiness Dumbledore left behind was palpable. His absence echoed through the halls of Hogwarts like a hollow drumbeat, a constant reminder of the cost they had paid. Harry stood silently in the now empty chamber, fingers still tingling from the fading warmth of the last spell. The others gathered around, their faces marked with exhaustion but also with something deeper, a growing unease. We did it, Ginny said softly, breaking the silence. We stopped the veil. But at what price? Neville's voice trembled. Dumbledore, he's really gone. Harry swallowed hard. He sacrificed himself to protect us all. We owe him everything. Hermione nodded, eyes misting. But something feels off. The veil's seal, it's holding, but it's like the magic is unstable. Ron frowned. What do you mean? It's done. We saw the fracture close. Magic like that doesn't just vanish, Hermione said, pacing. If Dumbledore's essence is tied to the seal, what happens if that bond weakens? Could the veil break free again? Luna tilted her head, serene but concerned. Perhaps he didn't just become part of the veil. Maybe his presence lingers somewhere in between. Draco's voice was quiet but sharp. If that's true, what if the darkness inside the veil twisted him? The room grew colder as the idea settled like a shadow. The man they trusted most, their greatest protector, could be trapped in a liminal space, fighting not just the veil's darkness but the creeping corruption threatening his soul. Harry clenched his fists. We have to find a way to reach him. If Dumbledore's trapped, we can't leave him there. Hermione pulled out a worn, ancient tome she had taken from the restricted section during their preparations. There's a theory about crossing veil boundaries, a dangerous kind of magic, but maybe it's our only hope. Ron ran a hand through his hair. You mean we're going to dive into that nightmare again? After everything? We have no choice, Harry said firmly. Dumbledore saved us. Now it's our turn to save him. As the group prepared for the next journey, the castle's walls seemed to close in, shadows lengthening with each passing moment. Unseen, beyond the veil of reality, a figure watched. Dumbledore, or what remained of him. His eyes flickered with conflicted light, wisdom battling encroaching darkness. Is this my prison, or my rebirth? He whispered to the void. The line between light and shadow blurred. And the true battle was only just beginning. The room was thick with tension as Harry, Hermione, Ron, Ginny, Luna, Neville, and Draco gathered around a polished obsidian mirror, an ancient magical artifact Hermione had uncovered in the restricted section. Its surface rippled like liquid, a gateway between the world they knew and the fractured space where Dumbledore's essence might be trapped. Hermione traced her finger along the mirror's edge, chanting incantations from the tome. The air vibrated with raw energy, and the surface shimmered, revealing glimpses of a shifting landscape beyond. Swirling shadows, whispers of voices, and glimpses of a radiant figure standing alone in a boundless void. We're ready, Hermione said, voice steady despite the gravity of their task. Harry took a deep breath. Together, we go in and bring him back. No matter what. They clasped hands, forming a circle, and Hermione invoked the protective wards they'd studied. Slowly, the mirror's surface deepened until it became a black pool, pulling them in like a tide. The world dissolved around them. They emerged in a place between places, an endless twilight realm where time folded in on itself and the sky roiled with strange colors. Before them stood a figure, familiar yet altered. Dumbledore's eyes glowed faintly gold, but his once kind smile was strained. Harry, he said, voice echoing like distant thunder. You came. We're here to bring you home, Harry said. We won't leave without you. Dumbledore's gaze darkened briefly. This place, it tests you, feeds on fear and regret. I have held the veil's darkness at bay, but it claws at me relentlessly. Suddenly, shadows erupted around them, coalescing into twisted versions of their worst memories. Harry saw his parents' deaths replayed. Hermione felt the sting of abandonment. Ron heard echoes of his failures. The group stood firm, drawing on each other's strength. We fight together, Harry said. We're stronger than our fears. Dumbledore stepped forward, summoning a burst of pure magic that pushed back the darkness. But to escape, he warned, we must confront the deepest shadow within this realm. The veil's heart, a fragment of my own essence twisted by its corruption. The group followed him deeper into the void, where the very air pulsed with malevolent energy. At the center lay a pulsating black crystal, surrounded by swirling tendrils of dark magic. It seemed alive, whispering promises of power and despair. Dumbledore reached out, but the crystal lashed out with a searing tendril, binding his arm. Let go, a sinister voice hissed from the shadows. Embrace the darkness. Become what you were meant to be. Dumbledore's face contorted in pain and resolve. No, I am not lost. Harry stepped forward, wand raised. We're here. Together. With a shout, the group unleashed a wave of magic, light and love intertwined, striking the crystal. It shattered, releasing a surge of energy that knocked them all back. Dumbledore collapsed, breathing heavily but free. The realm began to dissolve, and the group felt themselves pulled back toward the mirror. As they emerged back into the chamber, the mirror cracked and shattered, its purpose fulfilled. Dumbledore looked at them, eyes clear but heavy. I am free, he said quietly. But the darkness remains within me and out there. Harry nodded. Then we face it. Together. Outside, the stars shone brighter than before, as if heralding a new dawn. But the war between light and dark was far from over. The days following Dumbledore's return were heavy with cautious hope. His presence was a balm, yet the shadow lurking inside him was undeniable. Harry watched the once vibrant wizard carry himself with a measured gravity, a quiet war waging behind those calm eyes. In the great hall, the school felt different, charged with anticipation. Rumors swirled among students and professors alike, whispers of the dark power Dumbledore had touched and the burden he now bore. Harry, Hermione, Ron, Ginny, Luna, Neville, and Draco gathered privately in the headmaster's office. The air was thick with resolve. "We can't afford to wait," Harry said, voice firm. "The veil's corruption inside Dumbledore is a threat to us all." Dumbledore nodded slowly. "I have spent nights battling the darkness within. It seeks to consume me, to turn my magic against those I care for. But I have found a way, a final ritual to purge it. It will require immense power and sacrifice." Ron frowned. "What kind of sacrifice?" "The magic needed could drain the life force of those who participate," Dumbledore explained. "I will lead, but I ask for your help. Together, we can cleanse this darkness once and for all." Without hesitation, the group agreed. They were bound not just by friendship, but by the fate of the wizarding world. The ritual took place beneath the stars on the grounds of Hogwarts, where ancient ley lines converged. Candles flickered in a circle, runes inscribed with care and precision. Dumbledore stood at the center, his hands raised as the group joined in a chorus of incantations, weaving light and love into a shield against the creeping darkness. The air thickened, crackling with power. Shadows writhed at the edges, trying to break through. Dumbledore's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "Begone, darkness! You will not claim me or this world." A fierce battle of wills unfolded, magic clashing with shadow in a storm of light and despair. Harry felt the force of it pulse through his very soul. Memories flashed, loss, hope, fear, courage. Then, in a blinding surge, the darkness shattered, expelled like a storm breaking apart. Dumbledore gasped, collapsing into Harry's arms, his face peaceful and radiant once more. The others cheered softly, tears of relief mingling with the cool night air. The veil was lifted, the threat ended. Hogwarts stood strong, a beacon of light in a world that had nearly fallen to shadow. As dawn broke over the castle towers, Harry looked out, heart steady and sure. They had faced the darkness, faced loss and fear, and emerged stronger. Together. And the light would never fade.